Hello everyone, it's UB. In this video, I want to talk about the most recent Bitcoin price action, the sell-off we saw. I'll be using the replay function on TradingView here. Obviously, this is going to be hindsight analysis, right? This happened however many hours ago, maybe a couple hours ago now, but I still think it's beneficial to talk through it and what I was thinking in the moment. Obviously, you can argue you're just saying this now because the price action happened and you know it was going to happen, which, I can't really argue with that, but like I said, I still think it's going to be beneficial for you guys. Anyway, the first thing I want to note here is everyone and their mother had this triangle drawn on Bitcoin. Why not, right? It was pretty clear, and price was very clearly respecting both diagonals. So I just went on the H4, and you could see the clear diagonal there, right? I would say the top diagonal is stronger resistance just because, look at all the tests of it and the very clear resistance, or I'm sorry, the very clear rejections from the resistance. Okay? So clear resistance. Support, I wouldn't say is as strong just because we don't have as many touches. It doesn't mean it's not strong, but it's just not as strong as this top diagonal. Okay, so we have that out of the way. Now my trading range is based off of this breakout point right here. I could put my range low up to like 17.4, but I like this area right here because price wicks below it. I think if we even break it down on lower time frames, let's see. Sorry, I didn't want to waste too much time in this video, but it's fine. See, even on lower time frames, price barely broke above it. You can see the breakout point there, immediate retest. So I really like this as a range low, but it doesn't really matter if you want to move it up, what is it, like 100 points or so. My range high is based on this swing high, right? Okay, so we created our high, immediate rejection, and now we have our range. Okay, so my equilibrium is just half of that trading range, and my equilibrium is a pretty significant area. If we extend this line to the right, we could see that we have our consolidation before we put in our local top. We are consolidating just above the equilibrium. So overall, a pretty clean range. These lines right up here are just based on these swing highs. Okay, pretty straightforward range. Nothing too crazy going on here. We have our triangle, our range, and then our high time frame support down these green lines right down here. Okay, and this is just taken on the, I want to say weekly, daily, or 3-day chart, any of those. Okay, so we have our chart. Let's see what happened here. Let me slow this down. Okay, so nothing was really actionable for me here because let's think. If we are going to enter a long, let's say, you know what, let me back up. Where are the areas with the most amount of liquidity? Okay, and just by glancing at this chart quickly, I would say they're going to be right here. Okay, so if price is in search of liquidity in order to move up a bit higher, it's likely that we sweep these lows first before continuing up. Okay, and a sweep of the lows just so happens to be a retest of our diagonal support for our massive triangle here, right? So that's a pretty valid argument. That's the initial argument I was going with. I did not have any resting bids here because it's still, the lower time frame price action was not looking good to me. And what I mean by that is, where was I going with that actually? I tweeted it yesterday. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But I think I wanted to say that the lower time frame price action was not at all similar to what was going on like in here. We would see a 5-minute bounce, but the bounce would immediately get sold into and we would bleed back down, retrace the move, and then go down lower. So overall, it was looking quite heavy on lower time frames. We wouldn't be able to see that from hourlies yet, but let me continue here. Okay, so again, retested our diagonal resistance, got rejected. Again, absolutely nothing actionable for me here because I'm waiting for this sweep of liquidity here or waiting for a break of the confluent range high and diagonal resistance. This also would have been a clear long entry if we broke above there. Okay, so we're continuing, and there's a sell-off. So the first thing that's extremely concerning about this sell-off right off the bat is that we do not sweep the lows here. there's no violent reaction after getting that liquidity, right? Because that's going to be a significant area of liquidity, but we had really no reaction. And immediately after, the next hourly, this is probably only a few minutes in, I'm pretty sure it's only a few minutes in, but the next hourly immediately rejected the swing low. Okay, so with all that in mind, we still are at support, so this isn't a short yet. Okay, here we go. Just kind of, now this looked promising, right? Because we put in our 2 lows, or 3 lows actually, swept those lows, pretty violent reaction, and now we're closing back above support. A lot of people long this. I was heavily considering it, but going back to what I said about the low time frame price action, the low time frame price action was absolutely not similar to what was going on in here. Okay, and it's really impossible for me to show you that. You just have to go on the 5-minute and go back and see what I'm talking about, but you really, it's going to be tough too because you have to see it in real time. This is something that you can't necessarily teach because it's just hours and hours of staring at blank 5-minute charts and just watching the patterns and watching how price reacts to certain levels. That's unfortunately not something I can teach, but I guess you just have to take my word for it that it was not reacting the same way on lower time frames. So here, okay, swept the lows, very, very nice reaction, okay? But again, we're still below that key area of liquidity right here. So if price were to reclaim like 19K right in here, then we would have a good argument for a potential long, but at the same time, where would we be longing to, right? Because we still have that diagonal resistance. So I mean, a long into here is just not worth it. So this is still, in my book, chop, and there's nothing really too actionable that would come out of this price action. And then a clean rejection off of this swing high here and off of that key area of liquidity. And based on what I've been talking about, right? Swept these lows, strong reaction. For price to now bleed back down is not good. That is not what we've seen in any way. Like something like this, good example, right? We saw like a double sweep of the lows. Here's our initial low, swept the low again, and then pumped, right? But we never retraced fully this initial pump candle. So for us already to be retracing that initial pump candle is not good. This is where you should get out of longs, or you should hit the oh shit button and kind of go flat and say, okay, something's wrong here. Okay, so again, we break the low. Now, this is significant for, I feel like I'm just repeating myself here, but again, another attempt at the high, and we were unable to break above, and we immediately retraced it 3 hours later. So this is looking weaker and weaker. We're consolidating above support, which is not looking good, and also based on what I said on lower time frames, how each 5-minute attempt at a bounce was just getting retraced. Just nothing is looking good about Bitcoin here. Okay. And there we go. There's the sell-off. It didn't necessarily give us a retest to enter, which is unfortunate, but we did get a retest of that range high there, right? Look at that clear range high. And still, I remember this clearly, still on the 5-minute, we are getting that rejection. Okay, so we would attempt to bounce on the 5-minute, sell off, retrace the entire move, and sell off even further. So now my next area of interest is going to be the equilibrium. Where is the most amount of liquidity, right? And it's going to be right down here, confluent with our equilibrium support at such a key level, right? Consolidation before we put in our local high here. We should expect to see some sort of reaction from there, or that means we're really in trouble. Okay. And in this environment, sorry I keep pausing, but I feel like I just want to keep explaining more about this price action. It's really interesting to me, and I hope it is to you guys as well. But In this kind of environment, you don't want to set blind bids for a leverage position, at least, because especially with Bitcoin and how thin the books have been lately and how volatile it's been, it's just not really worth it to set blind bids. I would much prefer to either market buy a low time frame sweep of lows or something like that, or just wait for something like this and long this. Okay. So let's continue on here, see what's going on. Now this, in my opinion, is the most interesting part of this price action. Okay, so mind you, we are now in the Asian trading session right here. Okay, so the Asia trading session is typically a lower volume time, and typically they do like to sell during the Asia session. Okay, it flips every few months where they really like to buy, but typically the trend is during the Asia session we either chop or just do some bleed down chop type thing. But more importantly, when we see a consolidation break like this, or a support break like this, and we broke the lower time frame market structure here as well, you don't want to fade the initial sell-off. And what I'm saying by fading is you don't want to immediately enter into a long after the initial sell-off, because what we typically do is we consolidate for a bit, go for another sell-off, do a double or triple sweep of the lows, whatever, and then move up. I see a lot of people get caught in trying to fade the initial move out of a market structure break, and that's just never a good idea. Sure, you may get a nice flashy entry if we do indeed reverse from here, but you could always just long on a reclaim of this diagonal or the range high. You just have much safer entries. It's never a good idea to fade the initial break. And 2 years ago, it was more important because we were in a bear market, right? But now it's not. You don't see it as much. We haven't seen it obviously in the last few months, but that was just a very important pattern that played out very, 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 very often a couple years ago. So here we go, Asia trading session. We're consolidating for a bit after the initial sell-off, and if you notice, we have a diagonal resistance right here. So clearly the trend is still down. Okay, here's the equilibrium test. Again, still not enough for me to enter into a long position. There's another sell-off, right? Now we've taken this liquidity and closed above it twice. Oops, that was a rough circle. We've taken this liquidity and closed above it twice. Okay, our downtrend diagonal is still intact, but I believe this is where my alarms went off. If you want to know what I'm talking about, just check out my chart section. I don't really want to go into it right now. This video is getting a little bit long, but this is where my trading view alerts went off. This is a nice flush of early longs here, right? If you were to enter into a long up here, you're almost definitely stopped out by now, right? Especially after another, however many points of a sell-off here, another 450 points, like you're definitely stopped out. That's a nice flush right there. And we are also holding the equilibrium, which, like I've said multiple times, was a key area of support. Swept the lows, retesting the downtrend diagonal, and there we go. Now above the downtrend, and we can see what's going on now. And we're above that downtrend, getting rejected by the range high, but flipping this, lower time frame support and resistance into support right now at 18.3. I think I covered everything I want to talk about. I'm sorry this video is long, but this is obviously just really interesting stuff to me. I'm sorry it was hindsight analysis, but there's not much I can do. I hope you learned something from this video. If you have any further questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.